Hello there, welcome to the Ebon Hawk, a podcast discussing Star Wars news and Knights of the Old Republic. Today, let's explore more of Taris, including the lower city, and we'll celebrate Life Day. No, really. Spoiler alert for Knights of the Old Republic series and the Star Wars films and TV shows. This is where the fun begins. Alright, so our first topic, we're going to go over just some of our listener questions. Our first one comes from Jedi.Amir.Tal, and they ask, is Darth Vitate's spirit truly dead?
I mean, it seems like in the game, his spirit was transferred to his first body and the spirit was destroyed. And even without research, like, if you are aligned with the dark side, you really cannot transcend death. It's what Sith fear the most, but it kind of reminds me of The Princess Bride. I'm kind of gonna tweak the quote for my own purposes, but it's like, I think Wesley says, death cannot stop true love, it can only delay it for a little while. I would change the quote to, the dark side cannot stop death, it can only delay it a little while. Because even if you come back as like a spirit or a clone or Sith magic or whatever, the light side of the Force is where the true balance and alignment is in the universe, and you cannot transcend death in the Star Wars universe being selfish. It's only through being selfless, you know? So it's like the Jedi and the Sith are kind of searching for the same thing, but they just come to different conclusions, and the Jedi are able to do it.
Yeah, Darth Vader, I think, had, according to the lore I was looking at, like, he was being, like, preserved a little bit, but he was, like, officially killed in the game's canon, so he is definitely dead, to partner off the same reference. At Aaron Ringelmayer asks, ideal filming locations for Lahan?
Yeah, Rakata Prime is also known as Lahan. My ideal location is green screen. Everyone can just imagine it and not see it and have no idea what they're looking at until the final renderings are completed in the film. No, just kidding. I don't really have anywhere in mind, because sometimes just how films work is like you come up with a few different locations and you see what would be the most economic option available. So just like some beach, you know, where they get good tax benefits, I would say that. One thing I was kind of thinking about is, like, what if the KOTOR series or KOTOR films found an excuse to film in KOTOR, Montenegro, so then you could have KOTOR in KOTOR, and if they played KOTOR the game there, they could achieve KOTORception while they're there, and that would be cool.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of that island that they used in Pirates of the Caribbean, the one that Jack Sparrow and Elizabeth get stranded on.
Oh, you mean Sabe? That was a joke, because Keira Knightley was, you know, in Star Wars as Sabe.
Oh.
So they all, I guess, have to have an E ending name, but hers was Sabe, so.
That island, like, blown up on a more, like, continental scale.
Yeah.
Is kind of what that reminds me of.
I'm trying to think, like, where that was filmed, you know? Probably in
the Caribbean?
I mean, it could have been in the Caribbean, but I think they also filmed a bit in California. So both seas, you have the Pacific and the Atlantic represented in that film.
At least they spent a lot of time with, like, actual environment and not so much green screen, kind of like they did with the second and third films.
Yeah.
Mysteries of the Force asks, in KOTOR, were Mandalorians a race or a creed? By the way, you both are awesome. Thanks, Mysteries of the Force.
I love being told I'm awesome, so thank you. You're awesome too. So I think in Knights of the Old Republic they're a little bit more of a race, but it is kind of a creed as well. I just think, like, they're kind of just a bit restricted with the 2003 graphics, and they're kind of meant to be more of the antagonists rather than, like, these people accept all kinds of people, you know? But definitely in Knights of the Old Republic 2, you learn that Mira was kind of part of the Mandalorians, and it seems like Canderous is trying to get, like, all the Mandalorians with him under his banner so they're kind of organized and less disorderly and kind of can find some honor, you know? I think that's definitely something that could be examined, especially with the success of the Mandalorian series in KOTOR 1 or KOTOR 2 adaptations, and kind of give Canderous maybe some more to do.
Yeah, I don't. When KOTOR came out, trying to think back to what back end lore was available for the Mandalorians, and I think they were mainly just working with what they had, and they just kind of came up with more of a creed. But I mean, they're all from one place, so.
I mean, I think, like, back then, Jango was considered a Mandalorian, and, like, he was the last real Mandalorian, and he was killed off, and Kreia, when she's having her really long death scene, is like, telling you the future. She kind of hints at, like, Jango's death. It's interesting.
Ironic Designs asks, did you guys read the KOTOR comics, and what did you think of them? I have not read the KOTOR comics.
They came out when it wasn't exactly cool for girls to like Star Wars, like really like Star Wars. So I would always kind of feel, I don't know, like I would be like, hey, I'm just, first in line to ironically buy these Knights of the Old Republic magazines, and I've played the game, ironically. So I read the first few, but then just sometimes, like, life gets busy, and sometimes you just, like, go to the bookstore, and you kind of have to remember to get there in time, and sometimes they wouldn't, like, always have the comic you wanted. So I read the first few. It was really interesting to kind of see the character of Zane and the planet Taris just kind of interpreted in a different way, kind of get some more backstory. You see Karth mission and some Mandalorians, and then, of course, Revan and Malak appear. It was pretty interesting. I knew the overall steps of the story. I kept up with it, but it's fascinating. Lucy and Dre's story in particular, especially how it ends, really kind of stayed with me. It made me kind of evaluate Knights of the Old Republic more. I would, now that, like, they have, like, them all published in books now, maybe I'd like to get them one day and just kind of read through them and, like, bring them up on the podcast. So yeah, I've read them and I liked them.
Yeah, nothing against, like, the KOTOR comics, because it's more of just a problem with comics in general for me is I can never tell which or how they want you to read it, because some comic books, they like read it from right to left, some like top to bottom, right to left, and then the American ones are like left to right, top to bottom, and you're like,
yeah,
I don't know. And then the order of the quotes inside each box too kind of get confusing for me. So I prefer novelizations for my books and stuff.
Before we move on to our next topic, we just wanted to read a new Apple podcast review, and it says, Best KOTOR podcast out there. I've had the pleasure of following this page and podcast for a while now, and they come out with nothing but the best. If you're a Star Wars fan, this podcast is a must. Their Instagram page is always posting engaging stuff as well. Keep up the great work, Cassia and Coden. And that comes from CDST Srup. And I just want to say thank you for your kind review.
Yeah. All right. Moving to our next topic is more of our discussion of the KOTOR walkthrough. So we're going to be discussing a bit of, more of the Taris and then the lower city of Taris. So take us away, Cassia.
All right. So where we left off, Karth and Revan were in the upper city, just kind of taking in the Tarisian air for the first time. And you can just kind of walk around and explore. You can see Shelba's shop. And like a story detail that I noticed on this playthrough is that ships, swoops, and heavy weapons were banned during the Sith quarantine. So it's like you can't just buy a ship, so later, when you have to get off Taris, it's gonna be difficult. And then I stumbled into the medical facility, And if you kind of open this one door, you can kind of see some ailing Republic soldiers who are kind of like so badly injured that they're probably just like going to die. And Zelka Forn says, there's not much I can do, really, except make their final days, as comfortable as possible. And there's also a guy named Gurney, so, I kind of like puns. And then there is a shop, and you can see that T3M4 and T3 Hate are for sale in Janice Nell's shop, which I think it's hilarious that it's T3 Hate, So it's like, in my mind, like, T3M4 is the good droid, and T3 Hate is the evil one, I think I'm stealing, like, a Jenny Nicholson joke, but it's like, maybe, like, T3M4 is like, beep, beep, boop, boop, and then T3 Hate is like, boop, 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 so, yeah.
Man, I gotta, like, think back on the sequence. Isn't this a nod to A New Hope where you buy T3H8 and it, like, malfunctions, and so you end up with T3M4 instead?
Yep. It'll be a future KOTOR parallel for me to cover on the Instagram page, probably. But one fun detail is if you wear the Sith armor into her shop, she calls you your Sithness. And it's like, oh, that's funny. Like, I'd love to be called that. And then you kind of see some of Davik's thugs, like, kind of, like, shaking up old people or just random people, like, for money. And you kind of get the sense that Davik is the Jabba of Taris, and the exchange is kind of pulling a lot of the strings on Taris. So you can get light and dark side points all around. Like, this is your adventure, for you to choose who you're gonna be. So eventually, as you are exploring, you'll go to the Upper City Cantina, and you notice that it's pretty much just Sith officers and humans. The only aliens there are Twi'lek dancers, a Jor the Hutt, and a Rodian named Twitch. So, if you want to play Pazak or Pazak, however it's pronounced, you heard a lot of different ways in the series, you can get a deck there. And there's also the arena there, and if you want to fight there, you're going to be referred to as the mysterious stranger because you have no past, no history, just some big dark secrets. And it's like, wow, like, I really should have known that I was in for a big twist when I was playing Knights of the Old Republic, but I like that Karth kind of rationalized it, like, we can use credits, to get around the planet easier. And it's like, yeah, it's not just pointless side quests, we're doing it for, like, good, and there's a character named Bendek Starkiller there, so it's a nice homage to Luke's original last name in the draft of the script. I would recommend, like, having your persuasion ability be very high, so it's easier to persuade people. Because one of the people you're going to want to persuade on your quest is Sarna. She's in the Upper City Cantina, and she'll invite you to her Sith officer party in the apartments when they're off duty. And I'm pretty sure that she is voiced by Grey DeLiesel, who will go on to voice the Handmaiden, aka Brianna, in KOTOR 2. And if you watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, she plays Princess Azula. And if you watch Fairly Odd Parents, she is Vicky. So, yeah, fun detail. So you go to Sarna's party, and the thing about a Sith party is no one can handle their Teresian ale. So they all pass out, and then what do you do when you go there? You find their Sith armor, and you use it for your own purposes.
Not to mention whatever credits and other things are in their pockets.
Yeah, you loot all the things. Like, leave nothing unturned in this game, because credits come in handy. Like, I can never leave a chest unopened. It's like, yeah. we'll get into that later. But as you're dressed up in the armor, it's pretty impressive armor, like, visually. I kind of wish I almost wish it were the Republic armor. It's just impressive. It looks like knights in shining armor. Um, but you pass some drunk people, and it's it's kind of the story telling you like you look like a Sith. You pass the test. So then you're able to get to the lower city because your goal is to you're trying to get down lower so you can investigate the escape pod crashes in the Undercity. How do you describe the lower city, Coden?
Like definitely not dark like the Undercity, but like just kind of definitely just like tucked away and claustrophobic. Trashy too.
Yeah, it's definitely darker, definitely dirtier. It kind of just reminds you of like the crappy subway stop or a subway line. You'll see like lots of crash speeders around, and I'm like, I forgot that there are literally corpses on the ground. Like, it just seems like somewhere you wouldn't want to walk alone. And just like thinking of living there, it's like you can't really see the sky when you're there. And as Dennis had said back in the episode where we were talking about the score, he was saying like Taris is all about contrast, and it's like, so when I was kind of replaying for the recap, I was like, I'm really kind of noticing more of a difference between the upper city and the lower city, because over the years it kind of seemed like they were a bit similar, but it's like in the upper city you have sunlight and it's open and it's fresh, and then here it just seems like not as fresh and just kind of crappier. And you're gonna run into like a lot of thugs down there. Like I'd forgotten about that. And the people down here, when you are just kind of investigating apartments to find loot, like they take it personally and they will fight you. And it's like, how dare you, not be okay with that.
There's a lot of encounters similar to the Han Greedo encounter, and like everything is handled that way. It's like, hey, you owe me money, and then they just like shoot him with whatever the outcome is.
Yeah. And the gangs down there are two main gangs, the Black Volkers and the Hidden Becks, and it's like it was almost feeling like Romeo and Juliet proportions, like everyone is just fighting, and I'm like, wow, okay. I'm honestly kind of surprised that the Forbidden Love side quest that happens on Dantooine didn't happen on Taris, because it just seems like it would have fit and been kind of hilarious. But what I'd forgotten is how early Canderous is introduced. We previously talked a bit about him in episode 3, and at this point in the story, he's kind of just Davik's muscle, and he is voiced by the late and great John Segan. And we will get to Canderous fan cast in the future, so don't worry about that. But what did you think of Canderous when you first met him?
When I first met him, at that point, he was just another thug. And, I mean, you kind of knew that he was on errand. And so you're like, well, again, it's kind of getting some of like Jabba, personal messenger type vibe out of him. Similar again to the Greedo's role with Jabba in A New Hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it with the first impressions, it was pretty hard for me to really like nail down something solid, and I think or as future playthroughs rather went on, just more and more things kind of opened up.
Yeah, I guess I'd forgotten. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, he has a tattoo. It's a good tattoo. But we will definitely see more of him in the future. And then you go to Javier's Cantina, and this is the fun cantina. They have the best music, The Upper City one seemed a bit too hip, But this one seems like it would be the most fun to go to, because they definitely do not have a cantina in the Undercity, is all I will say. So, you see Calo Nord, I think he's like the bounty hunter with the Doc Ock glasses, and he's kind of like the Boba Fett of this story. And basically, if you want to live, don't talk to him because he'll just count 1. And then if you keep talking to him, he'll just say 2. And then if you keep going, he'll say 3, and then you're dead. Don't talk to him, is the moral of that story. And you'll definitely see more of Callow and Nord in the future. And then a story detail I didn't really realize is that the quarantine affects like all the ships that were kind of just around Taris. They were kind of forced to land and stay on Taris so they can search everything. As you kind of go into Javier's Cantina some more, you run into Mission Veo, and she is voiced by a Star Wars voice actress great, Catherine Tabor. You probably know her as Pinello from Final Fantasy XII. And she was also Padme in the Clone Wars, Vet in SWTOR, and Princess Leia in The Force Unleashed, and the canceled masterpiece Star Wars Detours. We talked a bit about Mission in episode 8 of our podcast, but she's like a teenage Twi'lek. She's blue. Her best friend is Zalbar. And you kind of just get the sense that Mission is the street smarts, and Big Z is the muscle. And as you talk to Mission, you kind of just get the sense that she's like a light, you know, like she's a beacon of goodness and hope within the lower city and Taris in general. I don't think we really need to do fan casts for them, because I think like with Mission, you would just want someone young or who seems young, you know, to play the part of Mission, and someone tall to play Zalbar. What about you, Coden?
Yeah, just someone who is like a high energy, and yeah, it doesn't really matter, I think, of like who they grab, just because I mean she's gonna be covered in blue makeup anyway.
Yeah.
And so just someone who can like display good high energy, younger.
Yeah. I just wouldn't want anyone from like the Disney Channel or the CW. Like I would say choose someone fun, but someone who can also be like a Jiminy Cricket, like kind of like a Conscience, you know? So you don't want them to come off annoying, you know, which sometimes can be hard with like kind of younger characters to kind of find that line between cute and annoying, but I think it can be done. And you can ask Mission like questions about Davik, the gangs in Callow Nord. But one thing that I noticed was if you ask her about Davik, she's like, oh yeah, he has a ship called the Ebon Hawk, which can break the Sith blockade. Like, so, yeah, I've never heard of the Ebon Hawk. What about you, Coden?
Nope, never.
Okay. Yeah. So that'll never come up again. And then Mission says she's a part of the Hidden Becks. And like literally kitty corner or catty corner, however you want to say it, like when you exit the Javier's Cantina, you're like, huh, that looks like a base, you know? And it was pretty easy to get in, like probably too easy, you know? So it's like, I would not want to like be in the Hidden Beck base, you know, because the guard would probably just let anyone in, you know. But when you're there, you get some.
It's like a friendly boxer being kind of like the guard dog of a home. Just like, oh, come on in.
I have a steak for you, you know. So like, just be cool. I'm just gonna be in and out and maybe take some stuff. So it's all good, you know. But when you go into the Hidden Beck base, you learn some information that Bastila is a slave. The Black Vulkars think she's just a Republic officer, and so does the Exchange, so that works in her favor. She's going to be the prize of the swoop race. So the leader of the Hidden Becks is Gadon Thek, and he says, I'm trying to win this gang war, and it comes to a culmination with that swoop race. And you need Bastila Shan, and she's the prize, so I think our interests can align there. So if you can help me get the prototype swoop accelerator out of the Black Vulcar base so you can win and race, I will sponsor you, and that's what we can do. One thing I was kind of wondering is, like, why wouldn't Karth ride in the race? I know it's because you're the main character, but it seems like he has more experience flying and everything. Like, what do you think, like, in an adaptation they could say the reasoning is, like, for Karth not being the one to do the swoop in the adaptation?
He gets extreme motion sickness. No, I don't know. Maybe he's like a more bred to be an officer, not so much of like a grunt, and so he's very book smart, but not like well practiced in, especially in something like this.
Yeah, maybe it could be interesting. It's like Karth is thinking he will, but like last minute, like maybe he's indisposed or injured or something. And it's like, oh, I guess I'll have to do it, you know? Because I think Revan at this point doesn't know he is force sensitive, you know? So it would be a surprise, and it's like, okay, I guess I have to do it. And then it's like, oh, he can do it, you know? So, and Gaddenthek says mission can help you get the prototype accelerator out of the Beck base. So she's probably in the Undercity, is what Gadden says. So you're gonna have to go down there and find her in Zalbar. And Gadden gives you some papers in exchange for your awesome Sith armor to get down to the Undercity. And funnily enough, when I was walking down towards the Undercity Sith base, the prompt came up that it said Karth looked like he had something on his mind. And I try not to be harsh on Karth, but like sometimes it's like when you talk to him, I think part of this is just kind of how like video game stories are told, because it's like kind of like an overarching narrative, and they can't tell you everything at once. You kind of have to feel like the conversation, you're kind of unlocking it as you go along, you know? So then I was talking to Karth, and he's like, oh, it's kind of refreshing for you to be straightforward. And Karth goes on to say, like, I was an advisor to Bastila. It was a fast battle over Taris. None of us were expecting it. And one detail I'd totally forgotten in the story is that Bastila's party requested Revan's last-minute addition specifically. And Karth was saying, like, that's kind of odd and convenient. And when you kind of prompt Karth on that more, he's like, I don't know, it just something doesn't quite add up. And I don't like surprises. And I guess it kind of makes sense for what Karth has kind of gone through, that he kind of has to look for patterns, because sometimes like patterns repeat themselves, you know? And you kind of have to be on your toes, especially if like he's been betrayed the way he has, you know? And I didn't realize like how much like foreshadowing there was for the twist, you know, at this point. But yeah, Karth has to expect the unexpected. Do you think there's more foreshadowing than you remember?
No, I don't think so. I mean, especially with that conversation with Karth, at that point, it was a boy crying wolf, and so I totally ignored Karth and moved on.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, this is, I think we brought this up last time. Like, this is something that I hope they would fix in the film adaptation. That, like, they need to fix all the Karths. Like, I have something to say. No, I don't. Never mind.
Yeah.
And just to keep like his interactions interesting, because at this point he's almost talked to several times, and then for me as the player, I just kind of stopped trying. He opens up later when Basil's in party, because that's somebody he's like comfortable
Their work.
with talking.
Their work acquaintances, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Karth knows who you are as Revan, so like he's, in the back of his mind, he's always kind of uncomfortable being around you without Bastila, because you know there's just that force block in his mind. And I don't, to me, I don't think Karth, like I think he definitely like believes in the force, but I don't think he just has that confidence in like the reliability of the force. And so he still sees Revan as Revan the whole time.
Yeah. So we'll definitely see more of these characters in the future, and we'll cover the Undercity in a future episode. So get ready for that. So you thought the lower city was hard. Try the undercity.
And by the way, I totally voted yes for yes, there should be rat ghouls in a KOTOR film adaptation.
Yeah, it was I took it personally. So I don't know. I just think that they're a little too zombie adjacent, and I wouldn't mind like rat ghouls appearing in the corner and you're kind of like, what's that? And then they're never brought up again. I think having them being like a main focal point of the Undercity, it's like they just look too weird.
Well, they look like a bunch of monkeys in the game, so they definitely need to be more creative. But
I just think zombies are, I don't know. I don't think we need zombies in KOTOR, but we'll get there when we get there. So,
yeah. First things first, let's take a quick break and we'll be back with our final topic. Welcome back, everybody. So we posted a poll on Instagram and we just wanted to go over some results. So the post was, in an adaptation, would you want Karth's story and personality just like in KOTOR or something else? Astronatka responds with like in KOTOR.
I don't know, doing the Karth episode kind of and replaying Knights of the Old Republic, I just kind of learned to, I don't know, not be as hard on Karth. Because I think it's kind of easy with all the KOTOR memes to be like, oh, Karth, you smile weird and you're paranoid. But, like, I think in a story, he does kind of have good reason to be that way. I think in a film, it wouldn't be presented the same way as a video game. And I think writers and actors could take that to their advantage.
At Rossinasi chips in, yes, exactly the same. At Astrodroid says he's a little stiff in the game, but I like his attitude, so I think pretty similar to KOTOR. And lastly, Ironic Design says he's basically a moral compass reminder to keep Revan grounded. Do you have any more thoughts, Cassie, before I chip in?
I think that when you have a movie, a lot of what you would maybe have characters say in a video game or a book or other mediums, you can do a lot more visually. But I mean, Star Wars at the same time is kind of like one of those series where, especially when George Lucas is writing, characters say exactly what they're feeling. There's no subtext. Like, Anakin is gonna say, I've thought of her every day, since I was like a kid, and it's like, wow, okay, you're just saying that, like, kind of no subtext. It's like very earnest, very high drama,
Awkward.
And it's like, wow, yeah. So, but maybe something I would do in a KOTOR adaptation is like, kind of like what Astrodroid brings up is like, he is a little stiff, but I like his attitude. And it's like, he is a pillar of goodness, kind of the light side of right action. Because everyone's not always the cool, chummy Han Solo, And sometimes I hate it when, like, characters are just made to be like, he's the Han Solo of the story because he's so cool. And it's like, there's only one Han Solo. You really can't do it again, So, yeah, it's like, he's good, but he has trauma he's dealing with, so he's not always going to handle it correctly. And Ironic.Design says he's a moral compass and who helps Revan stay grounded. So I would maybe say, like, maybe Karth could keep some of his thoughts kind of underneath the surface and then, like, just kind of lets things out when, like, he is really under duress or when it, like, would be appropriate, like, at a specific plot point. Because I think you want the main three, like, Bastila, Karth, and Revan to kind of be friends, but also it's like they have a mission they're trying to accomplish, and sometimes there's good and bad days, and they all kind of have their different agendas. So you don't want everyone to be too chummy, but you don't want them to be at each other's throats, you know?
Yeah, I think I would want kind of the same attitude of Karth from the game to reflect in the adaptation. And yeah, less of the the false prompt dialogue and have that be more useful. But I would also love to have like one Easter egg of that got something for you. No, never mind. And just to kind of mess with it, but then have the rest of it be useful interactions with Karth.
That would be hilarious. But yeah, it would be interesting to see how they do it.
All right, so we'll take another just a brief break. Welcome back, everybody. So, Astro Naka Art asks, maybe you could discuss future possible Star Wars projects in light of the last news. Disney is losing money. Do you think they'll need more animated TV series? And, well, funny you ask. There's this article from Variety titled "Star Wars Holiday Special: Getting Lego Treatment on Disney Plus." And Disney Plus has kind of a funny little library of Lego Star Wars. So it's gonna arrive on Disney Plus on November 17th, and it looks like it's gonna be a spoof of the holiday special that came out back when the original trilogy was new. Looks like it's gonna be centered around Rey and like an investigation of just her Force journey. So yeah, I don't know. It's probably going to be a good like slapstick humor thing, kind of like the rest of the Lego Star Wars stuff is. What do you think, Cassia?
Yeah, I think the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special looks amazing, and I think no matter what they do, it's going to be better than the Star Wars Holiday Special. So I'm excited for it. And it looks like you're going to have Rey, Finn, Poe, and Rose, and the rest of the crew kind of travel through the different eras, and I think it just looks like a fun like holiday Star Wars Lego fun adventure, you know? And I think it could have some fun Easter eggs to the Star Wars Holiday Special, and looks like it could be funny, and I'm excited now. I have, you know, plans for November 17th because that's how this year is going, you know? So yeah, I'm really pumped, and maybe there will be the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special sweaters, you know, and maybe I'll have to procure one. But I remember watching the Star Wars Holiday Special, or trying to once. For a hot minute, there was a Star Wars club at one of the schools like I went to, and it existed pretty much until they watched the Star Wars Holiday Special, and then they're like, maybe let's never, you know, do that again. So it was bad.
Yeah, and I hope it's just as embarrassing for like Rey and Poe and all these guys as the last one, because you know it just has to happen.
Yep. Oh man, uh just hearing like the podcast and newcomers having to watch the Star Wars Holiday Special, and like just hearing what they thought about it, it was very hilarious. So yeah, if you're trying to introduce someone to Star Wars, like do not ever show them probably the Star Wars Holiday Special. It'll just ruin it.
Yeah, maybe make a brief mention to not look it up, because they'll probably find it in their search of Star Wars content. So, you know, maybe some little thought of avoid it like the plague.
Yeah.
But you know,
Be-
we
uh,
know how that goes.
Fun story. So Carrie Fisher, in agreement for doing the DVD commentary for the original trilogy, George Lucas gave her like probably the only copy of the Star Wars Holiday Special. And Carrie Fisher, when she wanted people to leave, she would put the Star Wars Holiday Special on. So it works.
Well, I think that just about wraps it up. So thanks everyone for listening to the Ebonhawk podcast.
All right. You can find us on Instagram at Ebonhawk Podcast. And be sure to click the link in the bio for the easiest way to listen to our podcast. And our podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as everywhere else that Anchor podcasts are distributed. Subscriptions, reviews, and shares help us out immensely. And our email is ebonhawkpodcast@gmail.com. And you're welcome to email us your questions and business inquiries.
Yep. And then you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all just searching for Code and Bond. With the Twitch, just follow the Twitter feed for when I go live, but typically those are Thursday evenings, so just keep an eye out there. Our intro and outro themes were composed by Alistair Shorman, and he can be found at alistairsounds.wixsite.com/Alistair Sounds. Our transition music was composed by Christian Walker, and he can be found at christianwalkermusic.com. This has been the Ebonhawk Podcast. May the force be with you. We'll be back soon. Bye for now.